The Green Bay Packers are in the midst of a defensive line coach search. It tells us more, though, about who they might want to hire because it gives us insight into what they think about this team.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win that first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Green Bay Packers added, we got the reporting about another name, two new names, in fact, on the defensive line coaching search. Casey Rogers is added. Tampa Bay Buccaneers a defensive line coach. Eric Washington, the Chicago Bears defensive line coach. And that is in addition to, so by the way, Casey Rogers, longtime Todd Bowles coach. And then to replace Jason Rebrovich, they also have interviewed, and they started with Aaron Whitecotton, who was the longtime Saleh defensive line coach, San Francisco to New York. He's in New York as of this minute. And this is interesting, right? These are three coaches that I think are otherwise considered to be good coaches. Casey Rogers, that team, they've been, by the traditional metrics, which, I'm not in love with, top 10 run defense basically every year at Todd Bowles. Like, they are just always really good at that. Vita Vea is really good. They have some good players. The linebackers are good, but they are fundamentally sound doing that. Aaron Whitecotton, like, everywhere he's been, the defensive line has been really good. And then I think if you're looking at the case for Eric Washington, you're going, okay, there's some familiarity there. There's a longtime NFL coach. Going back to, he was at Northwestern, and the Bills as well. So there's been plenty of opportunities here. And Washington was the Panthers defensive coordinator for 2 years, and then was the defensive coordinator last year. I wonder if getting an up close and personal look at him in the final week of the season played a factor in all of this. But the thing that is interesting to me, as I try and map out, as I always do, okay, what little kernels of information can we glean? You hire Jeff Hafley to be your defensive coordinator. You know for damn sure that they are going to invest in safety. We said that on this show when it happened. You cannot play this Jeff Hafley defense if you don't have quality safety play. We understand from hearing from Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst, they thought the pass rush would be better. They expected the pass rush to be better. Jason Rebrovich was fired because the pass rush wasn't better. And now they're looking at veteran, to a man, veteran coaches. They're not going, hey, we could just promote the guy that we have in-house, Coach O, Vince Ogobasi, or you pick up some other guys, young, up and coming. No. Come and get a veteran defensive line coach. Any of these three candidates that the Packers have interviewed would be good hires based on their resumes. Could they come in and do exactly what they need them to do? We'll see. We know very little about coaching. We talked about this yesterday with Ben Johnson. But it seems like based on resume, any of these three guys would come in, and who knows if they'll be an upgrade, but I think they would be quality hires. But this is the point that I made about firing Joe Barry. The Packers fired Joe Barry because they think the talent is there. Now, they still had to add talent. You go out and you sign Xavier McKinney because your safety room is a nightmare. You draft Javon Bullard. You draft Evan Williams. You draft Edgerrin Cooper. You draft Tyron Hopper. There needed to be an overhaul in parts of the defense because you just didn't have guys under contract. You look at this team now, I don't think the Packers feel that way. I think they look at it and they say, this team needed to be better based on the talent that was in-house. In a way, their offseason admitted a lot of the guys on that team were just flat out not good enough. And Joe Barry wasn't good enough. Both of those things can be true. And part of that is the pass rush was good for most of last season, and they still could not put together a competent defense. All of those are factors here. So when I think about, okay, who could they go out and sign to bolster this team? Who could they go out and draft to bolster this team? You know, I said during the divisional round and on social media, I was like, you know, future Packer Josh Sweat. And as I sat down on Sunday night to kind of go through I have a list of all these Post-it notes in front of me. It's a jumbled mess. If you saw them, you'd be like, is this the musings of a serial killer? Because it's just like I have all these little notes for those of you watching on YouTube on topic ideas. And I can't even read them half the time. But I was writing down all these topics that I wanted to get to, and I was thinking about, okay, how can we project forward what the priorities are going to be in the offseason? And I was like, well, it's got to be defensive end. It's got to be corner. I even did a mock draft Monday that I scrapped. I scrapped it. Also, our pal Jacob Murley also had a similar top 2 picks. But I was just like, this is not interesting. And I don't know that I agree anymore. I think in the first round, there are defensive players, linemen, that could be there that would intrigue them. But it seems to me that what they're telling us with this move is they think Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley Enagbare, Brenton Cox, Rashawn Gary, certainly Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark, Devonte Wyatt, Carl Brooks. We know that they believe in those guys. And they're trying to bring someone in to maximize those players. That's already a lot, especially on the interior. That's a lot. And their investment on the edge is considerable. First top 15 picks on Rashawn Gary and Lucas Van Ness just 2 seasons ago. So they've invested a lot there. What this tells me is if they're going to go defense early in the draft or in free agency, corner is the place to do it because Eric Stokes is gone. That leaves you Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon, Robert Rochelle, who's really a special teams player, Kalen King, who could not get on the field ever for any reason this year. That's it. This is very similar to last year when it's like you can't even field an NFL team. Now, I guess I did not say the name Jair Alexander, but Brian Gutekunst, when he was asked about all of this, gave basically the same answer as when he was asked about David Bakhtiari last year. Well, we're still working through it. Whereas with Quay Walker and Devonte Wyatt, who we're going to talk about in a second, he was like, I love those guys. I want them back. Did not say that about Jair Alexander. So I think this signals an opportunity for Green Bay to revamp that position and to fix, quote unquote, this was a top 10 defense, remember, by the way, the pass rush such that it needs fixing with a coach rather than personnel. It's different when, you have a defensive coordinator. It was obvious that even with the flaws that Joe Barry had, your safeties and your linebackers were not good enough. So you go out and you affect that change. You fire a defensive line coach, though. That is a very specific thing. And it, by the way, you may recall, we reported it at The Leap when this happened, when he was promoted, that not everyone was thrilled that had happened, that there were major stakeholders that really liked Jerry Montgomery, that there were major stakeholders that were not big fans of Jason Rebrovich, and they might have both turned out to be right. So you improve that part of it, and if you're the Packers, you're going, maybe that's enough. Maybe that's enough. Does that mean, though, they would never consider a defensive lineman or an edge player early in the draft? No, I don't think that's true. I think they still will because that's just who they are. They went out and signed Preston Zadarius Smith and then used a top 15 pick on Rashawn Gary. So you can never have too much pass rush. But I think this defensive line move is, I was a little annoyed. Wendell Fajeda over at A to Z Sports, who's been on our show. These bloggers, these dirty bloggers. He said bloggerly, they can put these things out. He made a very similar point. And I'm friends with Wendell, and I was just like, damn it, Wendell. This is going to lead the show tomorrow. They get the opportunity to beat us to the punch. And he did. Not the exact same premise, but he's a smart guy. You should follow his work. We appreciate the work that he does as always. So, but this is something that I am always trying to do, to predict based on the actions that they're taking. What's next? What does that mean? What can that tell us about the future? What can we learn about what's going to happen next because of the decisions that they make in the now? Well, they've said a lot about Quay Walker and Devonte Wyatt, but they can't pick up those 5th-year options, right? Right? We'll talk about it next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. Who could not use an extra $300? I know I could. It'd be nice. Get some nice wine, some nice whiskey, something. Sounds good to me. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add a little bit of extra excitement because the Packers are out of the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just go to FanDuel.com to join today to get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Brian Gutekunst sounded pretty energetic about Quay Walker and Devonte Wyatt. But they have to make the decision on the 5th-year options here. And they have to make them soon. Quay Walker played better at the end of this season. And that's important because it does take linebackers some time. He's a 2023 draft class player. It can take 2-3 years. It took Patrick Queen until the last year to be a meaningful player, and it took Roquan Smith playing awesome next to him, Mike McDonald getting a head coaching job off the defensive performance. Patrick Queen, there were some ups and downs in Pittsburgh in ways that there weren't that last year in Baltimore. So, but it can take time for these guys, especially someone who was a developmental prospect the way Quay Walker was. He played a lot. The 5th-year option would cost $16 million. He essentially immediately becomes one of the top 5 highest paid linebackers in the NFL. That is craziness. Like if you thought, and I don't, but if you thought that the Jordan Love contract to give him top of market money to be, let's say, somewhere between the 8th and 14th, if we're being very generous to your determinations. Now, some people are saying he sucks, that he's like the 24th best. That's just nonsense and objectively wrong. So sorry that is the way you feel, but you're wrong. But let's just say that. Quay Walker is, for the balance of his career, a well below average starter. You cannot pay him like a top 5 linebacker. Devonte Wyatt, it's 13 and change $1 million. Now that's not quite as high end for a defensive tackle. It's still a lot of money for a player who does not even play 50% of snaps. So even before factoring in to this discussion that these were first round picks, that the Packers put in considerable resources at a time when they had considerable resources, they also thought they had more runway with Aaron Rodgers. That relationship, surprise, surprise, went south fast after that and during that season. probably in part because they used a first-round pick on Quay Walker and another on Devonte Wyatt. And they just haven't played to that level, like at all. But the Packers seem pretty excited about it. I mean, Brian Gutekunst literally said he's super fired up about both those guys. So, okay. Then what? What does that mean? You're just not going to give them that money. We just saw this happen with Darnell Savage. They kind of didn't have any options. He was a starter, and so they picked up the option. And it was a huge mistake because it was a big number on the cap, like $13 million on the cap. It's all guaranteed. That money is guaranteed. It hits your salary cap. There's no spreading it out. No nothing. It's all on your cap sheet right now. I know the cap sheet is like the least entertaining thing to talk about, but it's a lot of money to spend $30 million on a below average starter, at least for the balance of his career. That's what Quay Walker has been. Second half of the season this year, played his best football by far. You want to talk about getting paid off of half a season of play? Well, what about half a season when we have a 3-season body of work versus we just have 1 season, which is the case for Jordan Love. So again, even if you're being maximally generous to those criticisms, and I'm not, it's a huge difference. Most of Quay Walker's career, he has not been an above average player. He's not even been an average player. So there's just no way you can make this work. Now, on the other hand, we also saw, and I know quarterbacks are different, but the Packers did something interesting with Jordan Love's contract, and they basically took that 5th-year option. They said, we're going to give you a little bit more than that 5th-year option in total guarantees, and we're going to spread that out over what ends up being a multi-year deal. So accelerate some money now. You sign a new deal. We don't pick up your 5th-year option, but you've got a year there of contract. So you will get that contract here with us, is what the Packers are saying. And maybe you even, you could add void years, you could add more years. But you're adding, I believe they added 2 years. You could change the number now. This year's number, if you wanted to. Packers probably wouldn't, but you could. It would make some sense. Okay? At linebacker, I mentioned if he got $16 million, okay, he's the 4th highest paid linebacker in the league. But let's say you said, we'll take that $16 million, and rather than give it to you next year, we will give you a deal that guarantees you $16 million over 3 years. And that means signing bonus money up front. You stay on the number this year, which is a totally palatable number because it's year 4 of a 5-year contract or a potential 5-year contract. And he only costs $4 million on the salary cap as of now. You guarantee some with signing bonus. Now you can spread that out, and maybe he's only $8, $9, $10 million as a cap hit. Well, now you're talking about Jordan Brooks got 8.75 for the Dolphins in free agency just this last year. Kenneth Murray for the Titans got 7.7. Blake Cashman got 7.5. This is what starting caliber, but not star players, get in free agency. Jerome Baker got $7 million. TJ Edwards got $6.5 million. That's a really good deal. But that's what starting linebackers in the NFL cost. So you could spread out the cost and still have him for 2025, 2026, and potentially 2027. You're giving him kind of the money, but spread out, and you're extending the window of you having control over what Quay Walker, what team he's on, right? You can do something relatively similar with Devonte Wyatt. The difference is there's way more guys on the high end of the money. So if Devonte Wyatt is only making, these are still big numbers. If he's only making, just Just seems silly to even talk about it that way. But if he's only making $11 million, then that is a different, or excuse me, $13 million. I'm looking at these numbers here. Then, that's what Grover Stewart makes for Indianapolis. Sheldon Rankins got 12.2 for the Bengals. That's like DJ Reader got $11 million. He's a much better player than Devonte Wyatt. Speaking of $11 million. Okay, take that $13 million and say, you know what we're going to do? That is guaranteed signing bonus today. $13 million. And it's a 2-year deal. We're adding 2 years to your contract. And you can make up the base salaries because it doesn't matter. Would Devonte Wyatt do that? Could you get him for $7-8 million? Starting caliber defensive tackles get $7 million, but he's not a starter. So then what is the reasonable number here? That's the problem right now is what are you paying for exactly? If he's just a rotational player, then it's $4 million. It's $5 million. That's what he should cost, but that's not what he's going to cost. But so then that makes me go, okay, they're fired up. But he was our most consistent interior rusher, was what Brian Gutekunst said, which is right, by the way. But they couldn't get him on the field on early downs. They're trying to not play Kenny Clark at nose tackle to protect his body. That's what you're having TJ Slayton for. You can't play Devonte Wyatt at the nose. Carl Brooks outsnapped him last year. So what is he really? Is he just a really nice luxury good? Is he just a really nice player to have on 3rd and 8 to put in the middle of the field where you want Kenny Clark on the field anyway, where you might want to get Lucas Van Ness some reps, where Carl Brooks is just as good, if not a better player already? He might just be the odd man out. You might just not pick up that option and say to him, because look, this is a player coming out who was, some words were used in that Bob McGinn article. I remember. I'm not even going to repeat because they're so inflammatory. He was seen as a little bit of a knucklehead. That's being charitable coming out of Georgia. Can you motivate him this year to play his butt off, not pick up the option and say, hey, if you play really well, if you earn a starting job, someone's going to pay you. Maybe it's us and maybe it's not. But come in here and prove it. I think right now that's the most likely option because of the way we saw Quay Walker play at the end of the year, because the coaches seem to like him way more than I do. I think that's the most likely. And because they have a backup plan. Tyron Hopper is nothing right now. And it's obvious Edgerrin Cooper is a will linebacker. Maybe he could play the mic, but he is thriving where he is. You put those two guys on the field together. They were excellent against Philadelphia. We saw them in spurts. With those two guys on the field, their linebacker room looked so fast, so dynamic. They don't really have anybody else. You lose Devonte Wyatt in a year. You've got Carl Brooks. You're already paying Kenny Clark. You draft interior defenders pretty well. There's always interior defenders that you can draft. You've got Lucas Van Ness who can play some inside. Played inside at Iowa. I'd like to see that. Maybe this new defensive line coach is going to come in and offer that solution to you. Just something to think about. Last thing I want to talk about. Speaking of coaching searches, the Packers have a special teams coach, but there are good ones who at least were available. Why don't teams, when they have the chance to upgrade a coach, treat coaches like players? And this is true in all pro sports, not just the Packers, not just the NFL. We'll talk about it to close out Locked On Packers. Therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, communicate more effectively, but finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. That's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace, the leading virtual therapy provider, makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours, and it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by most insurance plans, and for many insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize mental health. As a listener to this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL and enter promo code SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL and enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code SPACE80. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Now for your second listen, go check out Locked On NFL now with 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. I wrote about this today for The Leap. The Titans signed Bones Fossil, special teams coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, who's now unemployed. Reporting as of this moment, as of this recording, is Darren Rizzi is going to follow Ben Johnson to Chicago. And if he doesn't, he's going to follow Sean Payton in Denver. They were together in New Orleans. And Darren Rizzi, you may recall, was the preferred special teams coordinator for Matt LaFleur the first time around, but the Packers did not want to pay his asking price, which for a special teams coach was probably not that much. They're now paying Rich Bisaccia to be the highest paid special teams coordinator in the NFL, at least as of last year. So this is sort of one of those like measure twice, cut once kind of deals. But what I don't understand is when you have the opportunity to upgrade your coach, teams do not treat it like a player opportunity. The Packers decided they could upgrade value for money on Aaron Jones. And so, without anything else lined up, they tell Aaron Jones, thanks, but no thanks. And they go out and they sign Josh Jacobs. They did not know they were going to be able to do that, but they did it. Last year, Brian Flores was allowed to look for other jobs. Mike Tomlin said, go get a DC job. And he got one before the 2023 season in Minnesota. The Packers had a defensive coordinator under contract who they were going to allow to coach the 2023 season. You may recall his name is Joe Barry. But then they fired Joe Barry after a year and had to hire not Brian Flores. Now, I think Jeff Hafley has turned out to be a really good coach. I think he's a great fit for Matt LaFleur. But guess what? You hire Brian Flores, he can't be a Minnesota Viking, and you got a really, really good defensive coach. Teams just don't do this. This is not a Packers problem specifically either. No team does this. If it were a player, you would do it. Rich Bisaccia has not performed to the level of his contract. Jair Alexander is probably not going to play for the Packers this year because of off-the-field issues and because he's just too damn expensive. Rich Bisaccia, the highest paid defensive coordinator or special teams coordinator in the league for mid special teams. If he were a player, that would not be tolerated. But it's not Brian Gutekunst's call. It's Matt LaFleur's call. To me, Bones Fossil would have been an upgrade. To me, Darren Rizzi would be an upgrade. Now, those guys have to want to come. That's the other part of it. They have to want to come and coach in Green Bay. So we don't even know if they would. But I don't understand why teams don't take a more aggressive approach on their coaching staff. Also, there's no cap. The Packers print money. What are they worried about? What are they worried about? I don't have a good answer for you. But it seems like they're going to miss out on a number of good candidates because they're just not willing to. And Rich Bisaccia could retire in a year. He could get fired in a year. And I'll be sitting in this same seat with the same microphone, probably talking on this show about what a mistake it was last year to not aggressively pursue the upgrades that they could have had when we don't know in a year what those upgrades could be. Doesn't make sense to me. I'm apparently the only one. All right, back tomorrow. Much more here on Locked On Packers. I told you I've got all these notes about all the different things that we're going to talk about. I got plenty more. And so we're going to keep doing it, churning through the offseason as we get you ready for free agency, get you ready for the draft, get you ready for minicamp around the corner. That's not really. Follow me on all the social medias, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on all the social medias, on TikTok for as long as that exists. Go subscribe on YouTube. Wherever you get podcasts, leave us a rate us review so you can stay Locked On Packers.